is when it goes under a process of chemical changes, when it goes through a whole process of light being pushed on it and great stress and great change. And then you get the perfect picture, the right answer, exactly how it's supposed to look. Then you have the positive. This is a negative. It's a fake. It's not the real friend. The real friend was in perfect color, clarity, you can see it. So when we choose friends, we have to choose friends wisely. Are those friends that are going to be taking us into the negative, even though sometimes those negatives look positive? You know, they might come with you to Juma prayer. They might come and pray with you 5 times a day, but then when they go home, let's listen to this music. Let's get into this. We're only doing drugs once a year or whatever because it's a special day. We're only doing this thing haram now and then. They're negative. It's a fake of the positive. You have to hang around the positive. You've got to do away with the negatives. Okay, so you have to look carefully in your life on who is good for you and who is bad for you. So tonight when you go home, you draw up a list and write best friend and acquaintances, and next to them, write which ones are doing what in your life, and then remove the negatives. Does that mean tomorrow you go to your friends that you've had for the last 10 years, even though they were negative for you, and you say to them, I can't talk to you anymore because you're negative in my life? No. It doesn't. But the next time you see them and they call you, say, I would love to come with you, but I'm going in another direction. And they say, what do you mean? You say, well, I can't come with you because I'm heading in another direction. You're not lying, you're telling the truth. You're heading in another direction, a positive direction. You're not going to follow the negative direction anymore. And so we have to choose our friends wisely. So for me, it was a decision that I had to make to choose my friends wisely. And the first friend that I understood when I was locked in that little box in the front of the church was to choose my God wisely. And so I started to ask questions at 7 years old about who God is. And I had questions that my priest didn't like to hear. The priest, who was the head of the church that I was in, he didn't like some of the questions I asked. He understood that I asked them, but he said, these are things of faith. These are doctrines of the church. These are what is found between this book. This is about a 100-year-old book written by the Catholic Church. You can see the pages are quite yellow and dark already. And these are the doctrines of faith of the Catholic Church. So this is what you're expected to believe. And so while I was in, the priest would go through page by page and explain to me the different doctrines. And when he came to the doctrine of original sin, and he said that every man is born sinful, I had a problem. Because I knew in my heart of hearts, like that little child knows, that he's born to be with the mother or the father. He's not born to be with the stranger or the neighbor over there. I knew that original sin was something that I could not follow. It just made no sense. Let alone there not been any doctrine for it in the Bible. I didn't know that at 7 years old. I didn't know that it wasn't found in the Bible. I just knew in my heart that there can't be original sin. That we're born originally pure. And this is a doctrine that I later found out that the church believed, but I was explained through doctrine. It wasn't explained through the Bible, it was explained through doctrine. And so what I did, I followed this belief, and I thought, okay, well, this must be the way it is. And so at around the age of 7 years old, I had this dream. I had this dream that I was being lifted in a way, and please don't get me wrong, I am no prophet or dream interpreter or anything like this. I'm just a human being, so don't. Some people have dreams and they suddenly want to turn them into prophets and open churches in their names and all sorts of strange things. No, that wasn't it. It was just a simple person having a simple dream. And in this dream, I dreamt that there were layers to heaven. It was almost like seeing one building built upon the other, and I could see these different layers of heaven. And I could hear these people all chanting. And I didn't know what they were chanting. I didn't know what they were saying. Don't ask me if the streets were made of gold or they're made of silver or they're made of pearls or whatever. I didn't know. That wasn't the dream. The dream was that I could see layers, different levels of heaven. And this is what I saw at 7 years old. And I could hear people chanting, and they were chanting the same thing over and over and over again. There was a line after a line, the same repetitive line. And I cannot remember the words. At 7 years old, I couldn't associate those words. But it sounded like a tune. Sounded like la, 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 going over and over and over and over, same thing over and over. It's one sentence repeated. And I went to the priest the next day and I said, I had this strange dream. And he said to me, well, what's your dream? And I said, I had a dream like there were 7 heavens. And he looked at me and he said, there's no such thing as 7 heavens. There's only one heaven. Don't be silly. And I said, well, I don't know what they're saying. I think they were chanting something in Latin. And I repeated and he said, no, there's nothing like that in Latin. And so I kept this in the back of my mind. And what happened, this dream used to repeat itself. You know when you have a repetitive dream, I'm sure some of you had these repetitive dreams. There's been research done over the years about dreams. There's something that says when you have rapid eye movement, when your eyes move, when you're sleeping, REM, rapid eye movement, they say that's when you have positive dreams. This is what scientists say. I'm not saying that they're right or wrong. And they say what happens after you have about 7 or 8 of these rapid eye movement dreams a night. So you have a dream, it lasts about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you come out of rapid eye movement, you go into another state of sleep, which means you can be woken up easily. You're not deep sleep. You know when someone's in a deep sleep, you're trying to wake them up and they don't want to wake up? This is another sleep. As you come out of that, there's a time that you almost wake up. You almost become conscious. And they say that now, scientists say that now that you, during that state, which is about 15, 20 minutes long, there's another state of dreaming that you have. And this state of dreaming is almost conscious dreaming, and you dream about negative things. So you have rapid eye movement where you dream about positive things, and the other part of your dreaming is when you dream about negative things. So there's 2 types of dreams that go on throughout the night like this. And so there's research and studies done on that, and that's not really what I want to talk about today. But it is quite common for people to say that they've had reoccurring dreams. Now, science has no explanation for it. They can explain why you have unexplained dreams that make no sense, where you're flying and then you're falling and then you're up, then you're down, then you're bigger, then you're small. Dreams that make no sense. Your brain is very active. But they do not have an explanation for why people have recurring dreams. Now, these recurring dreams that I had about exactly the same situation, exactly the same story, lasted until about the age of 12 or 13. It became such a big issue in my family that my parents actually thought maybe there's something wrong with my head. And so they sent me off to have tests to see maybe I had epilepsy or was having something like that, because these dreams sometimes, they'd even take place while I was awake. I'd be standing in an assembly at school, and I'd feel all numb and I would faint. And during the time I had fainted and passed out, I'd have the same dream. And I'd tell many, many people about it. My whole family knew about it. All my friends, everybody, school teachers, everybody, I'd tell them about this dream. And I had no answer for it. And so this continued for many years, like I said, to the age of 12 or 13. And then they suddenly stopped. No more of these recurring dreams. And so it took me many years. It says up there 27 years before I found the meaning what this dream meant. Well, what happened when I was about 11, 12, 13 is my eyes began to open to what was happening politically in the country, what was happening politically in South Africa especially. You see, typical white European guy, I grew up with 2 parents. One that was actually a parent, and the other one that was hired to be a parent. In other words, your domestic servant who works in your home. I learned more of my morals and standards and beliefs and ethics and behavior from the African lady who taught me how to be a child than I learned from my own parents. Now you see, in our families, in European families, we're very dysfunctional. Mother gives birth and that's it. Her responsibility is over in many, not all of them. Don't get me wrong, not all European families are like this, but the majority are like that. It's very much learn to run on your own. And so they allow you to do things and make mistakes and do whatever you want. And some of you might think that's a brilliant idea. But I don't think it's a good idea at all. It's our job as parents to be parents, not to be the best friends or friends with your children. It's to be a parent first and foremost. If you can still be a friend to your child, but you must not forget that you're the parent. And that's the most important thing that you are there to do. That's your job, that's your task, that's your calling in life. That's the position that you signed up for. And so this mother number 2 that looked after me, or I should actually call her mother number 1 because she guided me and showed me the most, she taught me about what was going on politically in the world. And the lesson that she gave me was one day I was at the bottom of the garden and I saw the red ants and the white ants fighting with each other. You know those small little red ants? And those big black ants, they were fighting with each other. I don't know if they were trying to steal the eggs from the one nest or what was going on, but there was this war, this conflict. And I asked her, why is this happening? Aren't they both ants? And she said to me, well, this is what's happening in South Africa. And I looked at her like I didn't understand what she was saying. And then she explained to me what was happening. And so from a young age, I realized, wow, well, not so young. I was only about 12 or 13 when I realized there's a difference. Because see, the area I grew up in, there was only probably about 3 or 4 or 5 white families in the whole area. We lived in a pretty much a rural area. And so I never knew that there was difference between races. It was only when I came to the city that I realized that there's difference between one culture and another, one race and another. And so the influences that I had outside of Christianity at that time was Hinduism and African traditional religion. So I didn't know any other religions other than those 2. So I would partake in what happened 2 days ago or yesterday where we had Diwali. I would go to fire walking. I would go to all these other religious ceremonies that took place in Hinduism. I got to know the difference between Kali and Krishna and Vishnu and all the rest of the gods and goddesses and demigods. And I was explained that this is just the essence that people have. I heard all those stories. So I was used to hearing all that. But at the back of my mind, I didn't become a Hindu. Or I didn't join one of the African traditional religions. I still knew there was one God. I didn't believe anymore what the Catholic Church had told me because I had too many things that I had issues with. But I still continued to go religiously on a Sunday. I still did my Holy Communion and all the rest of the things that were expected of me of the church, but I had problems with the beliefs. And so at the age of 13, I asked my parents if I could attend other churches to find out more about other religions. And before this happened, we went on a holiday to the beach, down the south coast somewhere. I can't even remember the place. We were somewhere down the south coast, and when we went there, I saw these people on the beachfront. They were playing guitars and they were singing and they were sitting around a fire. And I thought, what a functional family. This is all one family. There's daughters, mother, father, and sons. And they were all together as a family. Now, my family wasn't that functional. Like I said, my mother and father stayed married till the day they had both died. But they were dysfunctional. We could do what we want. There was no unity, family gatherings and sitting together as one family. That was something that I didn't know anything about. And I watched these people and I saw how they rallied together and I was interested in what they were about, and I went and I sat there and I spoke with them because it was a beach and it was open and it was in the late evening. And I started to talk to them and they started to tell me about how I needed God in my life. These are the first Christians that I'd met outside of Christianity, outside of Catholicism. And as I spoke to them, they said, you need God in your life? And I thought, that's true, I actually do. Because I knew this from a child. I knew I needed God in my life. I just needed direction. And so I went there and I said, I want to become like you people. Because what they were selling is what I wanted to buy. What I saw on the outside appealed to me. So I bought into the policy. I said, that's the policy I want. Let me sign on the dotted line. And I signed on the dotted line figuratively. They didn't literally bring out a contract. But figuratively, I did that. And so I was so excited when I went home. I told my parents, I said, I've become a Christian. And they said, but you already are a Christian. You were born a Christian, you're a Catholic. And I said, no, but I've become like another type of Christian. And they laughed at me and they joked and they went and my father was actually upset and my brother and my sister were so upset that they went and screamed at these people and said, how can you brainwash this 13-year-old child into becoming a Christian or their type of Christian? And that type of Christian was called born-again Christian. And so I call it my first spiritual calling to obedience to God was at that time. And so unfortunately the work that had been done, they washed over that and they destroyed that. And so I was unable to become a Christian. So I started asking more questions. And so at the age of about 11 or 12, I started asking questions about Christianity. And so I said to my parents, well, since this commitment that I made to God is not valid, and it was because I bought into a wrong policy, allow me to go to other churches and find out which policy is worth buying into. Which insurance company would be the best one to invest in. That's not what I actually said to them, but that's what I meant. I think back of it. And so I went to different churches. The first church I went into was a Pentecostal church. Now, Pentecostal churches, if any of you have seen the Pentecostal churches, they're very dynamic, jumping up and down and singing and clapping and speaking in tongues and doing all sorts of things that are quite foreign to us as Muslims. And I looked at this and I thought, these guys are strange, but it's quite appealing at the same time. It was like going to a Christian discotheque, like going to a party in the middle of a church service. And they played guitars and they played drums and it was very appealing. And as a young man, I watched this and I thought, wow, this is the church for me. This is like having a party every Sunday. And all the young ladies were standing in the front with these short little skirts on, and I was 11, 12, 13 years old. This was the place for me. But in the heart of hearts inside myself, I knew that this really wasn't. I knew this was just entertainment. And I didn't find anything strong there. And then eventually, when the singing and the dancing and the entertainment was over, the priest stood up, or the pastor stood up in the church and he said, I'm going to deliver today's Sunday message. And he spoke for 10 minutes. That's as long as the sermon was. And he spoke about how we need to give money to God. How God needs money to build his church. How he needs money to build a bigger new chairs inside the auditorium. And money was being asked and asked and asked. And I thought to myself, but surely God is God. Why does he need money? And if money is coming from God, that'll be counterfeit money because God doesn't need money in heaven. Anything that he produces in heaven and gives down to earth is going to be counterfeit because money is generated by humans. Man generates money. We don't need to get some supersonic pass card that allows you to get money directly from heaven. That money cannot happen. Humans generate money, not God. And so I found it in my head, I just found this very confusing, that somehow that if you gave money and you put it into the collection plate, it went into the heaven, God's heaven, and it came back down as spiritual money. And I found that this whole calling for money the whole time just didn't sit well with me. And unfortunately, I didn't go back there at that time, unfortunately. I liked it because of all the young people that are there and the way everybody was dressed and the music and everything. That appealed to me, but this money lending thing didn't seem to make any sense to me. And so I went to the next church. And this church was very conservative. They're very opposite to this. It was the Anglican church. And I thought, well, the Anglican church and the Catholic church are like two peas on the same pod. The only difference is that the priest can get married. That was the only difference I could see outwardly. Obviously, there's slight theological differences. And so I went from church to church to church, and I thought, well, they're all just the same. They're all different denominations, thousands and thousands of different denominations. I went to the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. I went to the Mormon church. And just talking about the Mormons, this is the Mormon book. This is the Book of Mormon. This is their Bible. And it's in English. And you can see it's a paperback. The paper is not very well, it's not written on very good paper. It's quite a cheaply made thing. I'm not criticizing that it was made cheaply. This is the Arabic version of the same one. That's the English book. This is the Arabic version. Nice hardcover, good text, much better quality paper. You see, it's not by mistake that they made one better and the one worse, because the aim is to tell Muslims about Mormonism, to convert Muslims into the Mormon religion. And so they give much better quality for Mormons. And don't think this is mistaken. They are very clever in what they do. But the Mormon church didn't make any sense to me, because they don't believe in original sin. Do you know that? The Mormon church, they don't believe in original sin. And so they said, no, that spaceships or a spacecraft came down and it settled in America, and that's the New Jerusalem, and they believe in all sorts of spiritual beings and demons and all sorts of other things. They've rewritten the whole Bible, and this is it now, the new version. At that time as well, I also went and I looked at Scientology. I saw a man on the street, and he said to me, listen, I want to introduce you to Scientology. This is a religion. What you need to do is you need to go and have yourself audited. And I looked at the guy and thought, well, I've got to have myself audited. I'm not even an accountant. I don't even have any accounts yet. Now I've got to go get myself audited. And they said, no, there's free auditing. They will audit you for free. And you go to this machine and they put all these probes on you and they tell you how many, take a guess, how many, what do you think they're looking for when they audited you? How many aliens are inside of you? Aliens. No longer original sin or sin. They're going to audit me to see how many aliens were born inside of me when I was born, from other planets out there somewhere. And if I get audited, then they're going to give me 24 workshops that I can attend. Obviously, each one costs money, 1,000 Rand, 2,000 Rand. They get more and more expensive. And they'll remove these aliens out of my body. Now, I didn't believe that either. So I went from all these crazies. So I don't just think I went quick jump and then I became a Muslim. I went through all the crazies along the way. And so I decided I didn't want to be audited, because I knew that this is nonsense from the beginning. And remember, this is the early days of Scientology. Today, Scientology has long moved on. People are suing Scientologists. Countries are suing Scientologists now. Anyway, I'm not attacking certain movie celebrities because they chose to become psychologists and get rid of aliens. But there are many people believing many different religions. But along the way, I came across another church. And this church was a church that I decided it made sense to me. One is that they didn't have a big 10-minute sermon about how you must give money to the church. And two, they were quite conservative. But the same day I found this church, in the evening I went to another church and I found they were also quite good. So what happened, I was stuck between two churches. And I'm going to give their denominational names. I'm not going to tell you where they are, but I'm going to tell you what the denomination is. Was the Baptists and the Seventh-day Adventists. The Baptists appealed to me because a lot of what they said seemed to make sense. At this time I hadn't studied theology or really gone deep into it, but what they said sort of made sense. It was very emotional. And it meant, it pulled on the emotional strings of my heart. But then we had the Seventh-day Adventists who believed in law. And they believed that you needed to obey the Ten Commandments. And that you needed to do things to prove that you were a believer. So both of these appealed to me, but both on opposite sides. And so my whole life, I was sort of tugged between these two denominations. But the Seventh-day Adventists were considered cults. And the Baptists were considered mainline Christianity. So I battled between these two. Okay. So at around the age of 13, I made a commitment. And then at just a few years later, when I joined the Baptist church, I made a commitment. Now what happened? I became a born-again Christian. Now many people say when they watch these videos or they hear me talking, they say you were never really a Christian. You've really showed us how you jumped around from one religion to the other and one church to the other. This shows that you were never really a Christian. Because you should have just believed the brainwashing you were given at birth and not looked any further. Now, that's crazy. You don't become a scientist or a person of any worth in life if you just believe what you're told without looking and doing research. How good would it be if a doctor just learned what he did because a textbook told him and did no practical training and no research and no learning in how to advance medicine? We have to look and research. So the answer that people often give to me and say you weren't really a Christian because you jumped around is silly. So at the age of 14 or 15 years old, 14 years old, I went to a church camp, and at this church camp they asked anybody who wants to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, please stand up and we'll pray for you and you'll become a Christian. And so the setting was beautiful. This church was made of glass. So behind me where I'm standing, the priest was standing here, and behind him there was glass everywhere. And you could see behind the glass, you could see these willow trees hanging over into the river. There's a river flowing by, and these willow trees were hanging over. So it's a beautiful picture. And the swallows were flying down because it was late in the afternoon, and they were picking up all the little insects that were coming off the water. And this is what the scene looked like. And there's somebody playing on the organ very softly, quiet music. And they were humming backwards and forwards, and then they asked anybody want to become a Christian and wants to accept Jesus and all the rest of it. And this is how it went on. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I got this warm, fuzzy little feeling inside of me. And I started to feel all emotional. And I said, yes, I want to do it. And so I became a born-again Christian. And when I became a born-again Christian, I was very excited about this change I had made. And I went and I told everybody about this. And obviously the first people I told were my parents, and they said, you've gone crazy again. You did this when you were 13, now you're doing it again. I said, yeah, this time it's different. And so I started joining Bible study groups and going to church on a Sunday, and a Friday afternoon I'd go to church. And I had it both ways, because on a Friday I'd go to the youth group. On Saturday I'd go to the Seventh-day Adventists because they kept the Sabbath, which I still don't know today why Christians keep Sunday, because the Bible says that you must keep the Sabbath. And we all know that the Sabbath is a Saturday, not a Sunday. And then I'd go to the Seventh-day Adventists on a Sabbath, which was a Saturday. And then on a Sunday, I would go to the Christian church. So basically, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, my dance card in a way was full. I had something to do the whole time. So it was a good thing because it kept my hands away from doing evil and doing wrong. And so there was a lot of good that came out of that basic training. And so as I went further on in my life and I got older in years, I got involved in high school. And I was in high school, I got involved in the SCA. Now, the SCA is the Students' Christian Association. It's very much like the MSA. And I was involved in that and became chairman of the school. And I got involved in evangelical work and outreach work and missionary work. And I was very, very active in the community. And the more active I got, the more I got involved with politics again. Because I was hearing in my church, when I went to these churches, that we were all equal in Christ, but I saw just white faces. So if we're all equal in Christ, why is there a separate church down the road for Zulu-speaking people? Why is there a separate church over here